For our first lesson today, we are going to solve for zeros of a quadratic equation. So a lot of factoring today. When we factor, we have to have our equation in standard form. So standard form is our ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So this time we're going to have it equal to 0 instead of y. To solve by factoring, we're going to use what we call the zero product property. The zero product property just says if you have two numbers that are multiplied together and it equals 0, then one of them has to be 0. There's not an instance where you can take two numbers and multiply them together to get 0 without one of them being 0. So for example, if a times b equals 0, then either a has to equal 0 or b has to equal 0, or technically both of them. For this class, we're going to have factors just like down here. X plus 3 in parentheses, x minus 7 in parentheses. If those two things multiplied together equal 0, then one of your two sets of parentheses has to equal 0. And then we would just take these a little bit further. We would subtract 3 from both sides to figure out that x would be -3, add 7 here, and x would be 7. So really that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take our factoring that we've been doing. We're just going to set our two factors equal to 0 to figure out the x values. So what does it really mean to solve a quadratic? When we solve a quadratic, we're finding the x-intercepts. What that really means is we're finding where our graph, which is our parabola, is going to cross the x-axis. The most common scenario, if I have a parabola, it's going to, say, look something like this. How many times does the graph that I just drew cross my x-axis? 2. So this would have 2 solutions because it's crossing the x-axis twice. This is the most common. So most commonly, you have 2 solutions. Your graph will cross the x-axis 2 times. A less popular graph would be just your vertex touches the x-axis. You would just have 1 solution. And one last example, this all the way down at the bottom, we have a parabola that's kind of floating up, but notice my arrows are going up. Will this graph ever cross my x-axis? No. So this has 0 solutions. So when we solve, we will get 2 solutions, 1 solution, or 0 solutions. Again, 2 is the most common, but 1 and 0 can also happen. All right, so first question, we are going to solve by factoring. First thing you want to check, make sure your equation, your quadratic in this case, is set equal to 0. So we've got this equal 0 over here, so we're good to factor. When I factor, the first thing I always just check for is the greatest common factor. Do all three of these terms have anything in common? No. So 3 terms with nothing in common, I'm going directly to my asterisks. Remember to fill out your asterisks, the first number goes top left, top right. There's 2 and 2. B goes to the bottom, so the bottom middle is -11. And the tricky part for the top middle, you've got to multiply the first number times the last number, A times C. So 2 times 15 gives us a value of 30. So now to fill in the 2 spots, we have to find a number that multiplies to give me the top, but adds to give me the bottom. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me positive 30, but add to give me -11. -5 and -6. Perfect. Can I reduce either side of my fractions? Yep, the right side reduces. I can divide them both by 2. 1 over -3. Make sure you keep that negative on the bottom. So this side doesn't reduce, but we reduce this side. We're going to add our x's back to the top, and then we're going to write our 2 factors. So one of our 2 factors was 2x minus 5. The other one was x minus 3. You can put that 1 in there if you want. Oops. Yep, and then this still equals 0. So the equals 0 just gets brought down from over here. We just took the 2x squared minus 11x plus 15 and we wrote it differently. We factored it. I promise if you take these 2 sets of parentheses and you multiply them back together, you'll end up with the original. So now we're going to use that 0 product property. We have one set of parentheses being multiplied by another set of parentheses, and it equals 0. So we know that one of these sets of parentheses must equal 0 by the 0 product property. So either 2x minus 5 equals 0, or the x minus 3 has to equal 0. So we're going to take and we're going to solve both of those for x to get our solution. So add 5, 2x equals 5, beside it, divide it. The second one's just add 3, and x equals 3. So in this case, we had 2 solutions, which means this parabola, if I made you graph it, would cross your x-axis 2 times. It would cross at 5 halves, which is 2.5, and it would also cross at 3. Questions on this? Let's try a couple more. So again, we're going to solve by factoring. First thing I notice, however, we do not have 0 on one side. So the first thing we've got to do is move this 18 by subtracting it. Now remember, when I move that 18, I want to make sure that I put it in the right spot. I want my equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So when I move that 18, I'm going to write it after the 7x. So I'm going to keep 7x squared plus 7x minus 18 now equals 0. Because that's in standard form. I don't want to put the 18 out front because that would not be standard form. So now I have a is 1, b is 7, and c is -18. Once I'm in standard form, there is no greatest common factor, so I'm just going to put this into my asterisks. So take a minute and see if you can factor that. So I filled out my asterisks. I had 1 in the top left and top right, 7 in the bottom middle, and 1 times negative 18, which is negative 18 in the top middle. Then I was looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 18, but add to give me 7. So 9 and negative 2. When I look at my 2 fractions here, neither one reduces, so I can just add my x's to the top. And then go ahead and write my factors, x plus 9 and x minus 2 still equals 0. So now I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to set them equal to 0. So x plus 9 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, which gives me 2 answers, x equals negative 9 and x equals 2. So another scenario where we end up with 2 answers. If you get 1 answer, you'll just end up, when you factor, you'll end up with like x plus 2 and x plus 2, the same 2 factors. So when you set them equal to 0, you get the same number twice.
If you do the same number, that equals 1 solution?
Yeah, it's just 1 solution. Because if x equals 2 and x equals 2, if I graph that, it's still 1 point. And then sometimes, which doesn't happen very often, you'll end up where your x's just disappear when you rearrange things, and that's when you have no solution. Again, this is our most common. You're going to factor it, get 2 answers. Sometimes you end up with the same thing twice, which just means you get 1 solution.
Are we going to be graphing this? No.
So this is like the way to figure out where your graph crosses the x-axis without graphing them. Letter B at the bottom, first thing you want to do is write it in standard form. So we're going to start off by subtracting 6 from both sides. 2x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. What do you notice about all of our coefficients? So they have a greatest common factor of 2. So the first thing you want to do before you put this in your asterisk is to factor out a 2. So I'm just dividing every single term by 2. So now I'm going to take what's in my parentheses here, and I'm going to use that for my asterisk. So we have 1 top left, top right. Again, we're ignoring that 2, that greatest common factor that we factored out. B goes in the bottom middle, so 2 goes in the bottom middle, and then top middle, 1 times negative 3, which is negative 3. Then we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give you the top number, but add to give you the bottom. Yep, 3 and negative 1. I'm looking at these 2 fractions here. Since there are 1s on top, I know neither one of them reduces. When I write my 2 factors, I have x plus 3 and x minus 1 still equals 0. But we've got to take this 2 and put it somewhere. We're just going to bring it over and put it out front. So we're going to take that 2 and we're just bringing it over right there. So again, if I take that entire right side or left side, pardon me, and I multiply it all together, I should end up with the original 2x squared plus 4x minus 6, which we could subtract 6 or add 6 to get back to the original. So now this time we have 3 things being multiplied together. The 2 is being multiplied by this first set of parentheses, which is being multiplied by the second set of parentheses. if I set them all equal to 0, will 2 ever equal 0? No. You can kind of just ignore it. 2 will never equal 0. And then x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. So you get x equals -3 as an answer and x equals 1 as another. Questions or concerns about this first lesson? So on the next page, you will see your assignment. Make sure once you get past the first couple questions, they're no longer in standard form anymore. So you've got to watch to make sure you move things and put them in the right location. So for question 6, you're going to move that -2b, but it's got to go between the 5b squared and the -16.